Good morning, Mr. Thompson.
Good morning.
Thank you again for coming in to see me as part of our coaching cycle.
Yes.
You'll recall that this is the second time that we're meeting about this focus question. The focus question, just to remind you, is how do my management strategies impact student engagement? And so you've chosen your deliberate practice as rules and procedures. And so this really fits in well with supporting your growth through that deliberate practice.
Yes.
And so I came in on Tuesday, the 15th, at 10:12 is when the class started, and I actually started recording at 10:18 and ended my recording at 10:28. You've had a chance to look at the data that was collected, and so I just kind of wanted to ask you a couple of questions, ask some of your thoughts on that. After looking at this data, and just to remind you, that's the seating chart for your class. So anytime I'm referring to a student in the notes by the number, it's corresponding to the number in the chart there. After having some time to review the data, what are some of your thoughts about the data? Is there anything that kind of stands out to you?
Well, one of the main things that would have stood out strongly is the gaps that I'm noticing, and what I need to do more of to get the students to focus on the lesson that is being done in the particular time.
So what are some of the gaps that you're noticing in particular?
Well, quite a number of students are still talking off topic, and quite a number of them are still waiting, based on what the data is showing. They're still waiting for me to work the better work question before they copy it from the board, rather than attempting it. Sometimes the question that I choose for better work is something that they are seeing for the first time, so it's really something to stretch them somewhat. So if they don't know, and I don't often offer any explanation for the better work, I allow them to attempt it before. But I notice over a period of time, if it's something that is new to them, some of them will make an attempt to do it. Others, if it's something that is new and strange, they sort of wait
Right.
for me to work it before they start engaging in the discussion or copying from the board.
So let's talk first about the students that are talking off topic that you mentioned that you noticed in here. Why do you think that is?
Well, as is shown here, because they're kind of waiting for me to engage them in some cases, in waiting that they're having that conversation among themselves about stuff unrelated to the topic.
How do you think you can address that or make a change in that behavior?
Sometimes what I do, I will speak to them about it, and for those who do not comply, sometimes I will ask them to change their seat. Sometimes when I ask them to change their seat, it's not permanent, it's just for that particular period, and then they can go back to their original seating position afterwards. And sometimes I make it permanent depending on the extent of the chattering that is going on in the class. As sometimes what I do, I point them to the rules that are displayed in the room. And I have been giving a few of them teachers' detention. I am yet to print the detention slip for the parents to sign. So I've not been doing that as yet. But
Okay.
there are a few of them who assign teachers' detention who have come and served. Others have not. So for those, I need to write up the referral to the dean's office.
So you have, what I'm hearing from you is that you have a very set plan for setting the expectations and then what the consequences are for those expectations. I want to talk a little bit about the bell work itself.
Yes.
And the impact you think that bell work has on the level of engagement. You've indicated that you believe that that the bell work, because it's new content, and oftentimes the first time the students have interacted with that new content, that many of them are waiting for you to help them solve it before attempting to do it on their own, and therefore they're spending that time off task. Do you think, can you think of a way that you might be able to frame the bell work to make it more engaging for all of the students in the class?
Well, yes. Maybe what I can do, as I've done a few times, I realize that it is something that is very new and they're going to struggle a lot to respond based on the expectation. I will offer an explanation, not giving them too much information, and then I will set them off to do the work. But what I can do is look at the ability level of all of the kids in the class, and then pitch the question at a difficulty level that they all can manage. Because sometimes the ones who are progressing in the work are the ones who will attempt the question, even if they're not sure what to do. They will still start doing something, start the discussion among themselves, and start writing something down on the paper. The ones who are low achieving, they're the ones who will sit and maybe have a conversation among themselves and waiting for me to start doing the question. So that's one thing I need to do, maybe making an adjustment to the bell work itself so that it is pitched at a level that everybody can attempt it.
Okay. Yeah, let's look at doing that. Is there anything that I can do that can help you kind of looking and evaluating the bell work?
Most of the times the question that I get for the bell work is a part of the lesson.
Okay.
So, right. So.
Oh, okay.
So maybe, right. So maybe what I need to do, if I realize that the question itself is maybe above the level of my students based on where we're at, is to is make the necessary adjustment.
Okay.
To kind of tailor it to the performance.
Like scaffold it.
Right. Yeah.
For what their needs are. Excellent.
Yeah.
Can I have you take a look specifically at this column of data again real quick? And what do you notice specifically about this data?
Well, this is basically about what the teacher is doing in the class at the time.
Right. So what is the teacher doing? Do you see a trend here or a pattern?
I think when you came in the room, there was one student, as is referred to, at my desk, because they were what we were doing, what I said to them before you came in, is that some of them did not do the Math Excel at the due date. So once I put in the grades for those who did it, all the others who did it afterwards, they were going to come and show me on the computer so I can put it in.
Right.
So that child that was at my desk, that was what he was doing at the time. Because it's kind of difficult for me to go back individually. Like sometimes they will shoot me an email to say, Mr. Thompson, the math Excel. I did the Math Excel and so much. For those who do it, I'll get it from the email that they send. Not all of them do that.
What is your procedure for late work?
Well, so because I want all the children to do as many of the pieces of work I did, what I do, I will accept and in fact sometimes I encourage them, and sometimes I even extend the deadline, because some of them really want to do it, but sometimes based on what they say, I don't know if they're speaking truthfully. Sometimes they have internet issues at home, and so once they get home, they can't do the Math Excel because it is online. It's an online activity. And sometimes they want to do it in class, but I told them that what is it Math Excel? They cannot do it in class. So sometimes I encourage them to come early in the morning. A few of them do that. Sometimes they say they have to take the bus.
But when they turn in the work, what is the procedure for turning in that late work? Like how do, yes.
For Math Excel, it is late. They have to come and show me on the computer.
Okay.
That I did it, and this is what it is. And then I put it in from Math Excel. If it's a paper-based work, then I would just ask them to drop it in the basket, the green basket, and the table at the front. That's where I ask them to drop their work.
Okay.
Right, so before you leave the class, upon entering, if you want to drop it at that point, before you leave the class at the end of the period, just drop it in there, and I will collect it.
Do you think that there is some form of tool or process that could help you in terms of time management with those students so that they're not coming to you during class to show you that work? Is there some kind of strategy we could put in place or a digital tool that we could put in place in which they could record that they've completed it so that you're not having to look at it during class time? And so specifically for this student, he would be able to participate in the bell work and not be sitting there waiting for you?
Well, I think the email that I encourage some of them to send
Okay.
me is one way of doing that. There's one student who did a screenshot of it,
Okay.
and then sent that to my email. So I was able to see the sometimes if the print is too small when they do the screenshot, I'm not able to read it because it looks blurry on the screen.
Okay.
Right, but if they kind of
Make it big
make
enough
it
so,
bigger and
yeah.
then take the screenshot afterwards, and I can see what it is.
So maybe just how that's communicated so that all the students are doing that for you so that they're not interrupting your class, because that was part of this, but I want to actually bring your attention one more time to this, and I want to underline some keywords that I want you to take a look at. Okay, so if you look specifically at these two areas, I only made changes when there were actual movement changes here.
Oh.
So what do you notice then from here to kind of here? Are we in terms of teacher action?
Then at the front of the classroom.
Right, so if we look at the map, this is primarily, actually I think it was a little bit further in, primarily where you were in the classroom. And, obviously you needed to be there for a good portion of the time because of writing the work on the board. But in terms of the reflection, what are some of the impact, or what is some of the impact on your students when you're standing here that you noticed within the data?
I'm not sure. Maybe the interaction could be greater if I, maybe walk around in the class a little more.
Okay.
Which I do from time to time. That's like after the old class instruction, and I'll give them something for them to do either in the group or individually. Sometimes I'll go around and check and see what they're doing.
Do you think that walking around during this time would have an impact on some of the data that you're seeing here in terms of the student behavior?
To some extent, because I realize that some of the ones who talks off task, for example, I'll be walking around, and if I'm at this table, then maybe the chattering is going on here, and then if I come here, then the chattering is going on there. But from time to time, I try to move around the entire room.
So if we looked at the data, a majority of the talking is happening where in the room? So we're looking, even starting here, we're looking at these, right?
13, 14.
And 15, right?
15.
And then some of the off-task, yep, same here,
14,
13,
yeah.
14, 15. And then some of the off-task behavior is happening there. So we're looking at this section and this section here. This is where our observation was happening. So
What is this? This is period 2, right?
yeah, period 4 actually.
Period 4?
Yeah.
Oh.
So this is an end cap, so we had a student sitting here instead of in one of those seats. So that you had someone on the end
Okay.
instead of on the table. So, and then we had some kind of calling out that was happening here, right? If we look at the data, 25 to 28. So, and that's kind of where, in terms of where you're standing, is that, and then you had the one student, right, who was sitting there.
Okay.
So what does that make you think?
Well, maybe my physical presence would make a difference if I maybe traffic more through the space when the tables our children are seated.
Right.
But, this table, I'm trying to remember the children was here. I think it was
This is
Nicole. Nicole sits here. They're at 4. Jeremiah sits here. Jesus sits here. And Joanne, I think, sits here. These are the 2 children who have given attention. I've given Nicole attention twice. And I gave him once. I gave him much of attention.
So what do you notice about their proximity to you?
And they're farther away than most of the others.
So if you're stagnant here, if you're standing here, and they're the furthest away from you, and those are the ones that you're having to give the most severe consequences to, what can you deduce from that?
Well, naturally, I probably need to remove them and put them closer to the front. These table here.
So in our, if we reflect back on our notes, their behavior was not severe, but it was, in particular, this one was waiting for you, right, for you to do, where did it say that in the notes? To do the answer for him.
Oh, he's
Right.
Romero. I have to give him attention as well.
Okay.
Romero, and he's Ramos and Pinero. 24.
And what do you notice about their proximity to you?
And their father was.
Yeah.
I did receive Romero to, I think, number one of these here, but based on where he was, his back would have been turned to the board, so it was saying to me that he can't see the board from there.
So if it's difficult to move everybody to the front, right, to have the
Yeah.
perfect prime seat, so that when you're at the board, they can hear you, they can see you, and they are, it's easier for you in terms of proximity to manage their behavior. If we know it's impossible to move every student who needs that kind of close proximity to you, what is another solution?
Well, based on observation, the ones who are off task and focusing on other stuff are the ones who would need to be placed in the seats where they're more easily monitored.
Yeah. But if you can't move everybody, if you can't move everyone who's having behavioral issues in the class, if you can't, because you can't, we might move somebody up front and then that person goes to the back and we have off-task behavior issues again. So if we can't move everybody into these, 4, 6 seats that are prime seats, what's another solution? What can we do to reach all of these kids?
It's just to be there.
So you moving around a little bit more?
Yeah.
Okay. And do you remember in one of our previous conversations about the 3/4 turn?
Yes.
We talked about.
I tried to practice it, but I realized I have not perfected it. yet.
It's a challenge, I know.
difficult. I tried sometimes just turn sideways and write. Sometimes the children complain that they're not reading properly the stuff based on the writing when I turn that way. In fact, I remember a boy shout out, "Mr. T, you need to write a little better," because he's not able to.
Because they can't read.
Yeah.
It is a challenge,
here,
and I know you're practicing that, so you'll be practicing that.
Yeah.
In terms of your response, when a student's behavior is off task, and then you have an opportunity to respond, and then what the impact of your response is, do you notice any trends there in terms of your response to students' behavior and their response to you?
When I see that based on this, what the students are doing with the chat room is going on, almost non-stop.
Yeah, and what are, in terms of the teacher behavior that was recorded, do you notice anything in terms of how you responded to their off-task behavior?
There's no example at this point. I'm not seeing anything referring to teacher addressing some of those after behavior.
So, what kinds of things do you think you could put in place so that you are addressing that off-task behavior, that that's happening here, so that there is a student response to that it's making a change?
When I do, from time to time, point them to the rules that are there, and there's a book that I normally record the stuff that they do, and from time to time I call the students in my desk when it gets bad and talk to them about the stuff that is going on and the expectation I have and the change that they need to make.
Yeah, that's a great practice. That's not happening during this time frame, which we know is the bell work time frame that you're working in. That's happening during what time frame of the class?
Well, most of the times I do if they if misbehavior is happening while the instructor is going on, I would stop the lesson to do that. So when I give them something to do and they're doing that, then I would go to my desk, sit and call up a particular student who I need to talk about a particular behavior.
Okay.
Most of the time when they're doing that doesn't happen.
So during the process.
If you want to see me do it when you're there, then I will. By the times when I come, I just do it to see how I do it. But I do it from time to time.
Do you think?
I also look into that book that I use to record this stuff. But once I'm there doing instruction, I don't stop the instruction.
Okay.
To do that. I kind of will probably speak to them about what they're doing. Sometimes I stop the lesson and I'll count down. If I'm in the middle of the lesson, I hear a bit of chattering going on. I will stop the lesson and start counting down, and I will wait. And from time to time, I also, as you suggested, ask them to stay for a few seconds behind, 6 seconds, and each time I had to stop in the middle of a lesson to wait for them. If they don't respond right away, I keep adding either 3 seconds or 6 seconds. The most that's on is 18 seconds.
So I have a question about that. So when you are implementing that callback, or when you are addressing that off-task behavior by pointing to the sign right away, what kind of effect does that have in terms of the student engagement in your current lesson? Do they appear to be more engaged after you address it?
Some of them, sometimes, some of them will so sometimes I don't tell them what the rule is. I will say, I call a name, for example. Scan, you are in breach of rule number 4. And they will look up, and sometimes they say, what does rule number 4 say? And then they will read it, and sometimes they read it aloud. Okay. And sometimes I say I'm looking at it, and I know that they're paying attention to what they say. And for the most part, they will comply. Sometimes in a few cases, and this is when I write the names down, and I point them to the rule, indicate to them that they're in breach of the rule, and they're not responding like right away. And that's when I write the names down.
Got it. So how can I help you in terms of developing some strategies that will address the student behavior in the moment without interrupting your lesson, to have an impact on the student engagement, so that a majority of your students are engaged in the lesson?
Right. So, well, as I've seen, I've done quite a bit of observation in my class. And as I said, because there's one thing that I don't do, and throughout my teaching practice, I've never acted. When you come to my class, whatever you see is what I do all the time. The thing is that, though, what I've never done while you're there is doing some of these things in terms of calling the children to my desk and having a conversation with them and so on about their behavior. I don't think I've ever done that while you're there. So maybe, as you mentioned, when you come to the class, probably plan to stay for at least half of the class or for the entire class, so you can see the full gamut of what goes on. And during your observation, and I try to follow the CHAM's principles in terms of the procedures and so on. I don't think I get it right 100% of the time. So based on your observation, you have additional suggestions, ideas that I can bring to bear on what I am doing to make it better, then I'd welcome that.
Absolutely. Do you think it would be helpful for me to maybe model some strategies for you in the classroom, or provide an opportunity for you to go and observe